All right. Cool, cool, cool. This is an interview for the CJAM Oral History Project, where we are celebrating 40 years on the FM dial. My name is Olivia Patricia, and I am sitting in the large studio at CJAM, and I am on an online call with Anks Kumar, who is currently in Etobicoke. It is July 18th and 4:15 p.m. How are you, Anks? Oh, I think we're having connecting issues.
Sorry about that. Are you good? That was probably something on my end there. I'm so sorry about that.
That's all good. I was wondering if you could just introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Anks Kumar, former sportscaster at CJAM 99.1 FM, formerly of Lancer Sports, and many other shows, as well as former president of the board of directors between 2012 and 2014.
That is so cool. So I guess could you tell me where you're from and how you ended up in Windsor?
I was born in Etobicoke, spent most of my life in Brampton, and then in 2009, I attended the University of Windsor all the way up until 2014. Outside of the classes on weekends, I would do music shows and sports shows. So that's kind of how it started. That's how I ended up in Windsor, and I think I answered a question. Or do you want to ask me again?
I guess what program did you do at the university?
I got in on a Bachelor of Arts drama initially, and then eventually went into drama and communications with a focus on broadcasting. And that's where CJM 99.1 FM came into my life.
And what made you want to at least start in drama?
I always liked performance art, and I think coming out of high school, I had a huge interest in acting and directing, but I quickly realized I didn't want to be an actor. But a lot of my friends and professors encouraged me to explore the radio station instead. So that's what I did. I mean, I took my interest in performance art away from theater and more so into broadcasting.
So, and then like through that, you found yourself going into, I
Oh,
guess, the
true.
CMAF program. I think we're having technical errors. All right. Oh, okay. Take two. It is currently July 20th. It is 11 a.m. and I am back with Anks Kapoor. How are you today?
I'm good, thanks. How are you?
I'm doing well, thanks. I was just wondering if you could possibly introduce yourself.
I'm Anks Kumar, former sportscaster and music host, and former president of the board of directors between 2012 and 2014 at CJAM 99.1 FM.
And are you from Windsor originally?
No, I'm originally from Brampton is my hometown. I was born in Etobicoke, lived in Brampton, but I attended the University of Windsor between 2009 and 2014. So for that brief period, it was my home.
All right, cool. So what made you decide to go to school in Windsor?
It was the fifth of five schools I applied for, and no one from my high school or hometown was going that way. So I took a chance, got in on a BA drama program, but realized quickly I didn't want to be an actor or a director. But I liked performing, and Windsor had a great communications program along with the campus radio station there. So I stayed at Windsor, and it was the best choice I made.
So, did you stay within the dramatic arts program or did you switch majors?
I started in MBA drama, and then eventually I joined the double major program after talking to one of my academic advisors, double major in dramatic art and communications.
Nice. I'm also doing that double major. Funny
How do you like it?
coincidence. Oh, it's good. It's good. I find it's a little hard to balance sometimes and pick courses. You gotta jump through loops. Um, but other than that, it's pretty good. I love the CMAF courses the best though. in the film
Yeah, I
courses.
remember those fondly as well. Lots of great memories from CMF project, especially for some of my friends more on the filmmaking and editing side. So some of my favorite memories too.
So, how did you, I guess, like discover CJAM?
I think part of it was my own research, but a lot of my friends also encouraged me and told me that we had a campus radio station. And my first semester there, much like any freshman, I was still trying to figure things out. And then I think it was on the recommendation of a few friends that they told me we had a campus radio station. I found it hidden away in the little nook of the CAW center there. Made myself known and just offered myself to Cassandra Caverhill, who was a program director at the time, and she said that to come in as a fill-in programmer. I told her I would take on any available slot available, and she hooked me up, and it was one of the best choices I made once again, and that's how I stuck with CJAM. That's how I found it, and nice to see that even all these years later, it's still part of my life somehow.
Yeah, yeah. So do you remember any of like the fill-in shows that you were a part of?
I think the very first one I did was Kiro FM, and it was a Sunday morning at 2 a.m.
2 a.m.?
Um, yeah, so Kiro FM was hosted by DJ Kiro and Chris Doig, who was one of my first friends at CJAM. And if Walter Patrician's there, he might remember Chris Doig as well. But I remember I filled in for them, and I believe it was an EDM techno show. And again, Sunday at 2 a.m. So Saturday night, I'm just, walking down Wyandotte past all the other kids, coming out of the clubs and pubs. And I'm just quietly making my way to do an EDM show for the first time ever. Must have been 19 and a little timid and shy. But once I filled in, it came together nicely, lots of great feedback. And Cassandra at the time and Adam Fox, who I believe was a station manager, kept inviting me back, just asking, what else can you do for us?
Oh, that's awesome. And you mentioned that it was your friends who recommended you to check out CJAM. I guess my question is, what was the like? How was CJAM kind of perceived on campus? Like, was it like well known, or was it talked about often?
A little bit it was. When I volunteered at CJAM, it was an interesting time because they were transitioning from the 91.5 FM dial to 99.1. So I had just started volunteering shortly after that. And that was like unbeknownst to me because, again, I was just a fresh faced undergrad trying to get some airtime and do something valuable with my time. But when you hang out long enough around CJAM, you kind of get caught up in whatever else is happening at the bottom of the CAW center there. And my friends caught on as well too. They were very supportive, and once they started tuning in, they started asking about CJAM, and it started to pick up. It was an interesting time. Now that I reflect on it, after you asked that question, I think it was the right time for it to garner a lot of attention, going from the 91.5 to 99.1. Because I just see how much the popularity picked up from there, and even until today, since I've left.
And I'm curious because I know, you were there around like the 2010s era, or
Mm-hmm.
years. Was streaming a big thing during that time, and did it affect people? Like, were people listening to radio? Were they streaming their music? Um,
I Yeah, there was a lot of ways people were accessing CJAM, and that's what we kind of realized too, that it was a change in the tide, so to speak. The way people access content from radio, and not just the FM dial anymore, and online too. The unique thing about CJAM was that because we were located just on that border of Windsor, Detroit, people could pick us up online, and it would connect to like their Windows media player or their iTunes, the precursor to Apple Music. So again, it was another interesting time because while a lot of these platforms were evolving at the same time as our medium, it sort of like inspired a lot of programmers to quote unquote sell their programs in other ways, link it with social media, beyond radio. And it really challenged us to be creative as well, too, being a campus radio station in a city like Windsor. So I think it was both ways when it started. And the one thing I liked about Windsor Detroit was that with CJAM 99.1 FM, we were always getting a strong listenership, whether it was through radio or online as well too. So we were lucky to have both kinds of experiences.
Mm-hmm. And I guess how, like you said, you were beginning to promote your show on social media. I know in 2010, like Instagram came out, Facebook has been there for quite a while at that point. So was using social media like a useful tool to reaching out to the campus community at that time?
Yeah, I think towards the end of my undergrad, which was around 2014, you're absolutely right. Just from the top of that decade, right? Instagram popped up a lot, Twitter as well too. It was a unique time for me as well because two things. I wanted to find an exclusive and substantial way to put out our programming, especially doing sports content. When I transitioned into doing a program like Lancer Sports. And around 2014, it was perfect because we had an internationally renowned women's varsity basketball team that was winning unprecedented national championships. They were going on consecutive runs. And when there wasn't a lot of coverage, even within our mainstream regional outlets, the unique thing about us as an alternative resource was that we could like put our programs and our games out through other means, such as social media. And that's what I mean when I said it was sort of like a changing of the tide, right? The old guard was being challenged. So for me personally, I think, again, it was a great time to be there. Not only the transformation of all these audio, visual, and social platforms that you bring up, but also the content that we could bring forth that was unmatched by our nearby peers and competitors, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I guess, so when did you start like doing play-by-play sports announcements for the university?
I started in 2013 with play-by-play specifically. Prior to that, I had asked Vernon Smith, who had become program manager shortly after Cassandra Caverhill, if I could do a sports show because there were a lot of music programs, great music programs, but I just felt I was going to get saturated or lost in the shuffle. And again, with our sports teams taking off, it just seemed like a perfect opportunity to cover exclusive content that no one else was. So when I was doing a half-hour sports show, I was getting a lot of support and feedback from the athletics department. They were happy to see their teams and their varsity athletes, some local, some international, getting some airtime and some attention, unlike anywhere else. And from there, they asked if I could do some web streams for them. Actually, we used to have something called Goal Answers TV, and I did webcasting a little bit in about 2013. That was when I started, just at the start of that varsity season, 2013, 2014. And then I just took it into radio. Vernon Smith saw how successful I was on the webcast. He was like, this would be great on radio. And sports radio is huge in Windsor, Detroit. The one thing I miss about Windsor is the passionate sports community, very local sports community that is very tight-knit, whether it's baseball, football, soccer, hockey especially goes without saying. And it just made sense to be a part of that through Lancers, who weren't getting a lot of time with play-by-play elsewhere. So around 2013, I brought the idea to Vern Smith. He encouraged it. And long answer to a short question, that's how it came together in 2013.
That is so cool. And yeah, that's really cool that you were able to, I guess, like put your passion like for sports into your passion for radio, which is something that I see us trying to encourage our volunteers these days to do as well. You mentioned that you were the president for the board of directors, I believe starting in 2012.
Correct. November 2012 is when my one and only term started, and it went until 2014.
And can you explain kind of how you got involved in that role?
Yeah, absolutely. It was actually the idea of Vernon Smith again. He saw how tenacious I was as a volunteer, whether it was as a fill-in music host for an EDM show or a jazz show. The topic is jazz, which used to be hosted by Todd Fraba, and then eventually my own music shows as well. For the Record was a lot of fun, and he saw me thriving with sports as well too, with my half-hour sports show. So he asked if I would be interested to succeed Josh Colm at the time as president. Josh Colm's term, I believe, was coming to an end. So Josh was on the verge of graduation, and I was nervous. Like I said, I was just an undergrad. I just loved being a radio geek. But once Vern brought the idea up, he really supported me and encouraged me. And we had an annual general meeting. I believe that's where it was decided, where at the end of the assembly, a couple of us had stood up and sort of announced our intentions and ambitions as to what we would do as president or of the board of directors and how we would work together to rectify some matters. It was a challenging time at CJAM. There was a lot of things to resolve regarding our signal increase with the CRTC and just our presence on campus altogether. So there were a lot of challenges ahead, but I knew I was someone who'd be capable to take it on as long as I had the right support and encouragement. And I believe a vote was put forward that very night. And later that night, they counted the ballots. And to be honest, Liv, to my surprise, I had won the presidency. I was up against a couple of great people. And it was just awesome to have the opportunity to speak in front of my peers and colleagues about an entity that made such an impression on me. But then when it actually happened and I went back to my home, it really sunk in that when I would wake up the next day, this was going to get around, that I'm not just a volunteer programmer anymore, but people would be able to trust me and rely upon me to lead CJAM in a good direction. So that's kind of how it came together. And it was, in hindsight, it was a great experience because not only did I now have the tangible and practical experience to relate with of volunteers of all kinds, whether they're new to the city or members of the community, but also to have some bureaucratic experience with eventually our local MPs and, as I mentioned, a government organization like the CRTC.
Mm-hmm. And I guess for our listeners who aren't aware about what the president does, can you explain what that role entails?
We used to have annual, we would have meetings within the board of directors, 3 to 4 meetings every year, periodically, mostly on a quarterly schedule, depending on everyone's schedule, because we had members coming from the Windsor-Detroit side as well, such as Willie Wilson, a fantastic host of the Motor City is Burning as well. So he was a big part of our team. When we would all get together, me, myself, or excuse me, let me rephrase that. Can you ask me the question again?
Yeah,
I'd love to give you
it's all good.
Please edit that out, by the way. I don't mean to go on rambling. You just sent me down memory lane.
What does the role of president, what are your responsibilities, I guess, as the president?
So as a president, we would have 3 to 4 meetings yearly to discuss the operations of each department in CJAM and its impact at the University of Windsor, as well as throughout the community. Make sure that we were upholding local and technical mandates as required by the university, as well as the CRTC, and make sure that we were meeting everything to standard and sometimes even beyond. As president, I wanted to do a lot of things that had us sort of get ahead of our neighboring universities. I know Windsor sometimes doesn't really have a big reputation as a broadcast school, but in order to change that, we would get together annually, and I loved these meetings because we would get all kinds of perspective. We had a board that was made up of various kinds of experience, whether it was someone as myself as an undergraduate student at the time, or longtime community members from a nearby Windsor, such as Todd Fraba, or on the other side, Willie Wilson coming from Detroit. So that was our main responsibilities. But we'd also look after disciplinary issues, whether it came up with certain programs, students, members of the community. And it was a lot of work, but those meetings would go on for about 2 hours, and we had a great rapport, especially with the departments at the time. Sometimes when you're a governing board, dealing with a staff, there can be conflicting interests. Lucky for ourselves at the time, we had a great makeup of Vernon Smith, of Sarah Morris, and Murad Erzin Kalagalu. So, it was never an issue to get a lot of our matters resolved from the board level whenever they brought anything forth.
Cool. And I guess a great achievement that your term, I guess, of board members accomplished was the power increase from, I think it was 491 watts to 2,084 watts in 2014.
Yeah, very good research on your part. It's true. Yeah, we got a huge boost. I'm not even sure if 2084 was our main target at the time. It's kind of a random number. I can't remember what initially we suggested, but we were able to get a lot of support and cooperation from the CRTC after we resolved some outstanding debts and financial matters. We did that with the support of the university. We did that through pledge drive. We had to look after some approvals and rejection of expenses for a little while. But the greater picture I saw was if our signal could boost well enough across the border, we would have such a great presence in a metropolitan like Detroit and parts of Detroit that is renowned for remarkable media history. And for us to be a campus radio station in Canada so close to have an impact, I thought that would be fantastic. And with the support of a local MP at the time, Windsor West MP, Thomas Massey, it just helped us a lot more. And I believe it was by April 2014 that had come through. And when it did, it was a huge achievement, not just attributed to myself as president, but the board members, the staff, the relentlessness and the patience of the volunteers as well. Because the one thing about CJAM is that we were always able to be relevant for any community that felt marginalized. And what I recall is in Detroit, there were some marginalized communities out there that probably felt their issues and their routines weren't getting the mainstream attention that they deserved. So for us to achieve something like that, it just meant more of a volunteer base giving Windsor a chance. And, with their contributions to our side of the border, it was going to be something big. And, all these years later to have the opportunity to chat with it about someone like you, it just shows the impact and the overall success of such a result.
Mm-hmm. For sure. And I guess kind of going on like one of the more like later achievements at CJAM, through my research, I found that you were a part of the first ever Joe Strummer Day in 2010.
Correct.
What was it like putting together, I guess, a special program like that is continued to this day? I know we recently had ours back in December. So it's still continuing.
That's awesome to hear. And I will fully confess to a programmer at CJAM. Once in a while, I run a quick Google search and see how it's going every December 22nd. So it's nice to see that it's alive and well. Personally, I don't always get a lot of time to tune into the original and exclusive programming that honors Joe Strummer to this day. December on my schedule nowadays is mostly occupied with hockey season, but to see it running strong and have you bring it up, same thing. It was something that was brought forth by Vernon Smith. He was a big Clash fan, and if you ever run into anyone who had the chance to volunteer with Vern or work alongside him, they'll gladly verify that. And I think it was just I think it started out as something a little personal, but I think once he brought it up to the station manager at the time, Adam Fox, and they sent it out to the volunteers. Everybody latched on quick. Windsor has a phenomenal indie rock scene and a lot of people that love that genre. So you can imagine how much of Joe Strummer's influence is on that city. And of course, being across from Detroit, one of the rock and roll capitals of the world, too, it made total sense that, we could do something like this. The way it came together was during the holidays, we didn't really have a strong volunteer base, meaning a lot of students would go back home for the holidays. People would take time off for their own personal vacations. So we needed something to fill some airtime. And December 22nd, right around Christmas, there's a lot of Christmas things happening, a lot of holiday things coming up. And us being the somewhat quote unquote rebellious alternative resource, we decided we'd do something a little more altruistic, such as Joe Strummer Day, and to confront some issues that get overlooked around that time of year: homelessness, poverty, and these were very much issues that Joe Strummer was passionate about too. I myself am a big Clash fan. I'm a big Joe Strummer and the Mescaleros fan. So when Vern brought it up for the first time, I was like, I would love to do some kind of biographical special for about 1 hour. I was a big fan of Alan Cross, who hosted a very good show that had like a retrospective look at new music and rock genres. So I kind of emulated him for the campus community level and did my own research, put something creative together to host. I believe it was a 1 hour biographical special. And it was good. I was very happy to be a part of the first ever Joe Strummer Day. Nice to see it continuing to this day. And, now that you brought it up, I'm sure I'll have to revisit the archives and see how else it continues, what else some of the programmers put together nowadays in his memory.
Yeah, it's a really special day and definitely something. I know Walter Patrician, like you mentioned earlier, he's actually the station manager right now. So it was something he was very passionate about putting together. So I think it's cool that that you were just like a big part of that, and it started a tradition here at CJAM.
Well, thank you very much. It was a very exciting time at 2010, that time of year as well, too. You know what? I was one of the few that stayed in Windsor that day because I wanted to present it live. We did have a lot of pre-recorded programs, but that was okay. It was part of the 24-hour radio marathon. And over the years, lots of international content has come through from what I recall. And it's just so nice to see it going strong. And nice to hear that Walter Patrician is station manager. He's an excellent choice and my choice definitely for one of the successors in a long line of great station managers from that station. So it's great to see that it's being upheld by the right people.
Yeah, exactly. I kind of want to talk about your career in sports broadcasting, because it's super cool that you got your start here at CJAM. From the people I've been talking to in the past few weeks as an oral history producer, I guess as a common theme I've been seeing is that a lot of people are jumpstarting their careers here at CJAM. So I guess I was wondering if you could talk a bit more about how you got started in sports broadcasting after university.
After university, I returned to Brampton, my hometown, and typical undergrad story. Sometimes you have to move back home for a little while, look after a couple of things to resolve the student finances part of life. But I started applying to local and nearby radio stations and TV stations. Took a little while because I realized coming back from Windsor to the GTA has amazing universities with renowned journalism and broadcast programs. So it was a bit of a hyper-competitive situation, and I hummed and hawed about it. But then in 2016, I got hired by Cable 14, and it was a local TV station. It is a local TV station in Hamilton, Ontario, and they cover local sports. They actually brought me in for lacrosse, and I gave that a chance, and it went okay. But once again, the same work ethic and passion that grew at CJAM 99.1 FM, I was able to carry that into a wonderful community such as Hamilton, very comparable to Windsor in the sense that they have a great varsity scene at McMaster University and the nearby sports scene in the local county area as well too. Ancaster, Stony Creek, Dundas, very comparable to what you'd see in LaSalle, Leamington, and even in the Forest Glade area out there, Tecumseh. So for me, it was such an easy transition, and I couldn't be more thankful and grateful to have that launch pad at CJAM. To come into Hamilton, come to way on the other side of the highway. So that's how I got started. And from there, junior B hockey came into my life. Teams like the Caledonia Corvairs and the Ancaster Avalanche. And it just kind of picked up from there, with OHL and some brief assignments at the mainstream level too with the NHL and CBC Sports. And it all circles back to CJAM 99.1 FM. I went out there. I took a big chance. People used to look at me sideways, but not anymore as they've seen how things have panned out. So that's how sports kind of started. It started in Hamilton. Nowadays, I am based in Etobicoke doing Ontario Junior A lacrosse coverage on YouTube for the Ontario Junior Lacrosse League. And later this year, I'll be covering Ontario Junior Hockey League, where we cover teams of the Halton region for Your TV Halton. It's been a fantastic journey. I'm looking forward to it. And while I'm chatting with you, I should let you know that the Leamington Flyers of the Greater Ontario Junior Hockey League on your side of the 401 are going to be joining us for some competition here in the Ontario Junior Hockey League as they've graduated to Junior A status after their Sutherland Cup victory. So any local sports fans nearby, I'm sure they'll be excited to hear about that from a former Windsorite, now calling Toronto home.
That is so cool. I know I'm from Burlington, which is just outside of Hamilton, so I did spend a lot of time in Hamilton. And I guess even the music scene in Hamilton could be comparable to the music scene in Windsor. They're very different in their own special and unique ways. But I feel coming from that Hamilton area to Windsor, it wasn't too much of a culture shock because it kind of felt like home.
Great point. And I think being nearby upstate New York, I know Buffalo is a bit of a further drive from Detroit, from Windsor, but you're absolutely right. I think it's very comparable in that sense. And Hamilton, Burlington area, lots of great bands. I mean, especially in metal, you're right. Windsor does have I don't know nowadays, but I remember when I started there, some of my classmates were part of the metal scene too. But bands like Monster Truck are like kind of from that area, and the Dirty Nil, who I like listening to as well too. Might have even spun a song or two of theirs while I was a DJ.
Oh, that is so fun. I guess before we wrap up, I was wondering if you had any like silly stories or fond memories that you would like to share about your time at the station.
At the station, you know what? It was silly memories. There was a couple times where I slept overnight on the couches in the lobby. I don't know if I ever told anyone that, but you can have that story now. Maybe it's an exclusive breaking news. I don't know if I ever brought that up to anyone. Late night programming, I would be tired and just didn't feel like walking home, and I would just pass out on the couch and tell myself, okay, I got to sneak out before the morning programmers come and maybe report me or something. Overnight programming, we used to sign the key out from the front desk upstairs at the CAW Center. So very trustable guy, but sometimes I'm just really tired in the middle of the night sometimes. Silly stories, I think that goes for my silliness, but some great times nonetheless. Honestly, I look back at my undergrad memories now and I think about a lot of the people I met and a lot of the programmers I met. You brought up Walter, and it's nice to see, how much he has succeeded in his own way in Windsor still. And I, think back to, some of the board meetings we had. We had some great food that was provided by the local businesses, some great relationships that I remember with places like Sam's Pizzeria. So those are some of the memories I really remember is, the impact we were able to make, especially me feeling like an outsider at the beginning. Windsor always felt like home, especially through the radio station. I loved interviewing bands. That was the one thing about hosting music shows. Again, taking some influence from a couple of my idols like Martin Shriek and Alan Cross. To go into the local shows. Sometimes we get bands visiting Windsor, Detroit, or fitting Windsor into their schedule on their way to like Toronto or on their way to some of the big.
Oh, I think we're having another technical issue. One moment. Hello? Sorry. I think the Wi-Fi just crashed here.
Hey, Liv, you all right? I might have lost you there for a second.
Yeah, I think I did. The Wi-Fi did a little blip, but
sorry, I can't hear you again.
Oh no!
And it just kind of went in and out. My screen blacked out there for a second. Okay, I think you're good now.
I think we're good.
This looks steady. Okay, yeah. If you, I imagine you'll be like editing parts of this anyway. Like, I don't know if there's a time length or you got to condense things. So, but yeah, where do you want to pick up from?
I guess you were talking about Windsor, Detroit bands, and how they would come on their way to Toronto or bigger cities.
Yeah, exactly. And, that was, again, what made it a lot more comfortable to be in Windsor was kind of that feeling of home. Some of my favorite bands from the GTA, passing through Windsor and having the chance to catch up with them and record some interviews to bring to the listeners of CJAM. That was a lot of fun, getting to hang out backstage with bands like Cancer Bats or Dead and Divine whenever they rolled through. At the time, one of my good friends, oh no,
my camera went out, but I can still hear you.
I can still hear you though.
Okay, cool. We'll keep going. We'll power through.
Okay, perfect. So yeah, with bands like Dead and Divine and Cancer Bats, and then even some like bigger acts that were stopping by, like Comeback Kid, Under Oath on the other side of the border. It was really cool for me to have that unique experience and bring content and then share it on social media as well to get some likes and shares from the bands as well too. So that was probably some of my favorite and fun memories. And when I look back on the sports side of things, the silliness, I guess, was Saturday nights, sharing a cab ride with some of my former programmers, Kiefer McDonald, Mike Specht, Tim Elliott, Mike Hugel. We would ride to South Windsor Arena. Those guys would follow my lead throughout a sports broadcast, and then we would go back home or hang out together for a meal afterwards. And there were like just some good times in between. Just knowing that we were like bringing some news and some great music to listeners that couldn't be accessed elsewhere. So that was like where a lot of the fun of it was for me, and ultimately. To win some awards along the way from the University of Windsor's Athletic and Recreational Services, CJAM 99.1 FM, of course, and the University of Windsor Student Alliance as Volunteers of the Year. I think that was the ultimate cherry on top. So those are definitely some of the favorite memories that I have that I recall fondly with plenty of fun and happiness, undoubtedly.
That is so special. Before we wrap up, one last question. For any person who is looking into maybe starting a show with CJAM or even getting into sports broadcasting, do you have any advice or any words of wisdom that you would like to pass on to them?
Absolutely. Definitely utilize the campus resource such as CJAM 99.1 FM. We are so lucky in Windsor to have such a resource because it's community driven. It's available to anyone on and off campus and anyone on either side of the border. And the one thing I remember about CJAM is any idea that anyone came up with, the doors were always open, whether it's music, news, sports, or any other subject matter. Just bring it forth. Never be shy of bringing anything up because everyone in Windsor, Detroit has a story that is definitely worth the airwaves, and CJAM 99.1 FM always made myself feel like that. The impression I get from you, it seems like it has definitely made an impact on you in that regard as well. and maintain that passion. Stay committed and dedicated to whatever subject or whatever genre you can see yourself or your community thrive in. Once again, CJAM is great to be a platform and an alternative resource to get started with. It has taken me in many different directions. I was lucky to bring it back home here in the GTA, even take it to the OHL and work for the Niagara Ice Dogs on 610 CKTV in St. Catharines. And from there, you develop relationships along the way. You know, people will notice your work ethic, your passion, your commitment, and your hard work. And that will definitely evolve into great relationships that will be substantial and that will be very necessary to establish yourself as a great communicator, whether it's on an audio platform, visual, or social. The best thing about CJAM as a starting point is that you can take it in so many different mediums nowadays, and it's nice to see it going. So those are my words of wisdom, and if anything else, Liv, reach me anytime. Happy to chat with you again. You did a phenomenal job, and I'm looking forward to the overall results today.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to chat with me, Anks. We had a little bit of technical issues, but we powered through. Thank you so much.
You know what? You're very welcome. And you mentioned technical issues, so I'll drop this one more story for you. You know, you're asking me about silly stories, and one just popped up when you said technical difficulties. You can choose to do whatever you'd like with this one. I remember sometimes we would have to do a sports broadcast, and we would have to take the Comrex apparatus, the remote radio gear, from the station across town to like South Windsor Arena or to the other side of the tracks, the St. Denis Center. And sometimes when we would set up, we'd have broadcasters live on location, but we'd also have someone doing the pregame, the intermissions, and postgame at studio. And I think a couple of times the Comrex and the station signals disconnected. So at one point, I remember one time, and this might have even happened during some of my interviews as well, was when the signal would drop, we would have to get the programmer or the broadcaster from the stadium to call the station line, and then we would have to turn on the phone channel and bring the mic like up to the telephone receiver so that the game could go from the receiver through the microphone, and that we could salvage the broadcast to listeners of Windsor, Detroit. So it would come out a little muffled, but that was just some of the creativity and improvisation that we had to do. So you know, you I recall stories like that, and I see where it's gotten me. So just remember to stay like creative and innovative, and never take it badly if a broadcast drops for a couple of moments. The best thing about CJAM is there's always a way that the programmers find a way to get us back on air and keep us going. So I just wanted to share that with you because it came to me before we wrap things up.
I love that. We're a station that perseveres.
Yeah, and you said it best. You know, we powered through. So thanks again for welcoming me into this. Happy to be a part of it.
Thank you so much, Anks. Have a good day.
You too.